Hello, Mary. Mary
Uh,
Woodward, this is Mary Woodward, and recording from Spain. And Mary, our first question for you today is to give us a little. Could you give us a little bit of background about how you have been in relationship with the Grace Presbyterian Church?
well, actually, I started coming to Grace probably when I was baby because
Oh,
my Aunt Dorothy Woodward was a pretty important person in the church. She was a very servant, and wherever there was a need, she would do it. My parents were actually married. They met and were married at Grace. And so we would come one weekend a month until I was about 12 years old. We would go to our church in South Jersey for 3 weeks, and we would come up to Grace and see the family, both because both grandparents were in the area. My parents' friends that had kids as well that we stayed with were the Sampsons, Gina and Alex, Gina and John Sampson, excuse me. We I knew Grace as a place where I came as a kid, where I sat by my Aunt Dot and that sort of thing. So it was very familiar. And so when I decided that I was going to go for 2 years to Spain, I, needed to raise support. And I had no idea how to raise support. I just said to the Lord, well, if you want me over there, you're going to have to get me to raise support because I'm terrible at this. But if you want me there, you can do it. When I heard that Grace asked if I needed support, and and they approached me about supporting me, it was like the Lord was saying to me, am I not going to take care of you? And not only did I make it for 2 years, I really essentially, from those 2 years, then went full time and have not come back, essentially for training and for taking care of my parents. That's my history with Grace. And so every time I would come back to the States, I would go to Grace. In fact, it's one of my favorite places to come because you guys are so friendly and so embracive.
So, Mary, what specific ministries are you involved in normal times?
Okay. In normal times, I am involved in what used to be called friendship evangelism in a suburb of Sevilla. That is my main ministry. Now, friendship evangelism, I've been told, is called life on life ministry, not friendship evangelism. But both the young and those of us that are older will understand what I'm saying. Finding ways to get to know people where you are, being friendly with them, being interested in them, loving them, not with telling them first about the Lord, but getting to know them. And in that natural conversation, what is important to you will come out. Then what does that lead to? It leads to conversations like this. Are the people that come over to visit you Christians? And I said, well, not all of them, but yeah, a lot of them. I thought so, because there's something about them. This did come from a person who believes in God and does their best to follow Jesus without understanding the whole gospel. But still, I was in shock and realized that the way we treat other people and the way we just love on other people makes a difference. Also, strategic engagement with local officials. That's what I said about it. I can tell the lady in charge of working with the youth in the town hall that I have some guests, and she will meet them. She'll meet them, and then she's got a list of people that want to learn English, want to speak with a real native English person, and that person will invite them over for coffee. The third thing is teaching and mentoring in my church. It's a church in the city. Okay, I am in the suburbs, and this is about 20 minutes from where I am. And it's an inner city church. Actually, I come into Grace and I feel at home because we have different nationalities. We have different socioeconomic groups. We have different, we have gypsies in our church, and usually the gypsies do not congregate with the Spaniards, but in our church they do. And it's just wonderful how I've been involved with many things over the years. Worship team, I've preached, I've led the prayer meeting, I've mentored the youth and mentored the Sunday school teachers, and done whatever the pastor wanted me to do. But I think my main ministry in the church is encouraging the pastor and his wife. It's very lonely to be a pastor in Spain because most pastors, including my pastor, who is a lieutenant colonel in the Spanish army, they are so overworked, and they need someone that will just listen to them without expecting anything of them. Now my church in Seville sees the town I live in as a church plant, a potential church plant. And before the confinement, we were meeting once a month just to see those who wanted to come and pray for the town, just to come and pray. We'd feed them a little bit first, give them a little bit of a snack with my home baked goods and coffee. And then we would pray for the town, and then I would take them on a prayer walk outside. And it's very interesting. The first time, I was really not expecting 12 people to show up because it's a new novel and different thing. And we really do have about 12 people committed of a church of 60 people, which is a big church for Spain. We've got about 12 that are really interested in at least praying for seeing what the Lord wants to do in the town that I live.
How has the shutdown affected these ministries? You can't get out very much. So how are you able to continue or are you able to continue any of it?
You know, when the lockdown came, it's such a learning curve. It was an incredible learning curve that really did not even have a chance to stop and think, you know, of what you were doing or reflect. It was just, we've got to get on to this. Lord, how do we do this? How do we continue it? You know, asking people to pray and whatever. So one of the good things about doing this is it has forced me to really reflect on how wonderful the Lord has been. And I'm so thrilled because actually in the town, the ministry really has not been affected adversely very much. First, I will answer that by explaining the positive. I've been able to keep in touch with friends in the town. And also, I've gotten to know my neighbors a little bit better. Now, I wish I had internet connection and I could take you out to my patio, but I can't because don't have internet access out there. But I have a front patio, and then I have an adjoining neighbor. And so he was busy, I was busy. It was very hard to get to know my new neighbor. But he's been fixing things and going crazy working from home. So he's been on his patio a lot. And his wife's come out with a little baby. And so in a way, I think maybe I've gotten to know them a little bit better than I would have in normal times. My neighbor to the left, we have adjoining roofs. And so we've had some conversations up there on our flat roof. So that's been really positive. With my students, although it's been double the work for me, and every day I just end up so exhausted. But the students, I think, they looked happy to see me. I mean, they usually are, but sometimes they don't because they want to play or they want to do whatever. And it was kind of like such a novelty early on to see a face, a real teacher, because in the beginning, the teachers were just sending assignments. They were on such a learning curve themselves to learn technology to be able to actually give classes online. So with my students, it's been very, very positive. So I haven't been able to have 4 of my classes, and that's been sad, but I have been able to do the rest. What's been challenging? I had to completely change my way of doing classes, figure out how to make my living room into a classroom. And especially for the younger students, I brought out my puppets. Yay, are we in a class? No, Rosa, this isn't a class. This is, by the way, I found a traditional flamenco dress for her. The kids like that because this year there's an April fair that everyone is missing because it had to be canceled. It's a huge, about 1 million people come, and everybody dresses up in those flamenco dresses, and they go out and they eat and they dance all week. And then one of the things I do is I make board games on the computer. Well, how do you do board games when they're there and I'm here? So I was upstairs and then putting something away, and I found my bulletin board. I'm like, haha, I can print the pages out and they can see it, and we can play. I can use sticky notes, and they can throw the dice on their side and I can throw the dice on my side. So the Lord has given me tremendous amount of creativity, which I was, you know I couldn't have come up with this myself. He's been very gracious. It took about a month to figure out how to have classes as dynamic as I usually tried to make them when I was actually physically with them. But the Lord has been so merciful. And I don't really think, as far as sharing the gospel with the kids, it didn't matter that I wasn't physically with them. The negative part, or the challenging, has been, obviously, since I've been forced to be in my house for 7 weeks without, before I could actually have a conversation with a physical person, except for the brief conversations with my neighbors through the patio and the roof. So little contact with others in the town. So now in my church, the positive is, although I'm technologically challenged, I had to use Zoom so much to connect with people outside Sevilla and abroad that I was able to talk about Zoom to the pastor and the tech guy in our church that wasn't familiar with it. And as of yesterday, they figured it out and decided the church could have an account. And so now, slowly, we're going to be able to have most of our meetings through Zoom. God gives you what you need. You have to be a jack of all trades sometimes when you're a missionary and a networker. Maybe you can't do it, but maybe you have part of the picture that the other person doesn't have. And then, of course, I tried to keep up with the church members through WhatsApp video, audio, and messaging, although it definitely is not the same.
What changes do you think your ministry might see after life in Spain returns to the new normal? I guess we call it the new normal.
Well, there's lots of opinions on that. Spain's things are always more fluid here than in the States. There are always more changes, many more changes. There's a lot more spontaneous things. That's just part of the culture. So it's going to be another accelerated spontaneous changes. We're just not sure which one of these yet. Churches will have to put in place a plan to do church during emergencies, I think. They're going to have to come up with a plan. I think this has been a wake-up call. I think more churches are going to have to do small groups and come up with what's going to happen if something like this happens again. This is all speculation. I was listening to a pastor that I respect very much in the northern part of Spain. And he was actually saying, it's going to force us all to do things more in community. It's going to force us all to be willing to meet in different ways and reach out in different ways. I think there is two possibilities of what can happen through this COVID crisis. I think people that are not people of faith, that don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, are either going to desire it more, they're going to desire for authentic Christianity, or they're going to get more entrenched and blame God for the, for the crisis and be even more antagonistic. This is a definite mission field, even though it's Europe, even though it has a religious background, but in many ways it's inoculated to Christianity. And so there's great opportunity to just, because people have lost jobs, it's 14+% of the population is unemployed. I think it's a great opportunity to share Christ and the hope that we have in Christ and how he never changes. And people are reporting that, and I think I've seen it in my students, more openness to listen. So hopefully that will continue. The big question is, will people return to church after they've been accustomed to doing remote? So that's a prayer request. So it will become evident if the confinement has made people think about God more or become more antagonistic. So our prayers is that they will be more open, and that God is allowing this crisis all over the world for his purposes as well. And he knows what he's doing. So we need to, whatever it looks like, because we don't know what it looks like, we as servants around the world need to be open to hearing from him to what the population needs now and how we can share the hope of a relationship with Christ during COVID and post-COVID.
That's great, Mary. Thank you so much. You've definitely given us a lot to think about, and I think this would be very, very interesting to our congregation to get to know you a little better, and certainly the work that you're doing.